Think about the last conversation you had today. Not a big one, just a small one. Someone at work, a neighbor, maybe a cashier. Hey, how's it going? Good, good. You? Yeah, good. And that was it. You went on with your day. Nothing happened. Nothing went wrong. But by the time evening came, you felt slightly drained. Not tired exactly, just empty in a weird way. And you couldn't really explain why. There was a time when talking to people just happened. You didn't prepare for it. You didn't think about it afterwards. It was just part of the day. Like breathing, like walking. Something you did without noticing you were doing it. When you were younger, you could talk to almost anyone. The kid sitting next to you on the bus. Someone at a party you'd never met. A stranger waiting in the same line. You didn't need a reason. You didn't need an opening. You just started talking. And conversations just went somewhere. Not always deep, not always meaningful, but they moved on their own. One thing led to another. You laughed about something dumb. You talked about nothing for an hour. And it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like time well spent. There was no filter running in the background. No voice checking your words before they came out. No part of you watching the conversation from a distance, wondering how it looked. You were just in it, fully, without even trying. I remember being able to talk to people for hours, without thinking once about how I was coming across. Not because I was more confident, just because that part of my brain wasn't running yet. The self-monitoring part, the one that's always on now. And then, at some point, something shifted. Not dramatically, not overnight, but conversations started requiring something more. A little more effort to start, a little more energy to keep going, a little more recovery time after. Like the same thing that used to cost nothing suddenly had a price. At some point, something got added to conversations. Something invisible. A kind of awareness that wasn't there before. Not of the other person, of yourself. Watching, adjusting, correcting, in real time. Think about the last time you were at a work event. Or a party where you didn't know everyone. Or just running into someone you hadn't seen in a while. And notice what happened inside you the moment the conversation started. There was a part of you managing it. Choosing words carefully, deciding how much to share, checking if you're talking too much or not enough, wondering if that last thing you said landed right. All of it happening quietly, underneath the conversation, while the conversation is still going. I notice it most in group situations, where there are 4 or 5 people talking, and I'm contributing fine, saying the right things. But there's this part of me that's just watching, like I'm slightly outside my own conversation, commentating on it, and I don't remember that always being there. And the performance doesn't stop when the conversation ends. You replay it afterward, that thing you said that came out slightly wrong, the moment where you weren't sure what to say and filled it with something that didn't quite fit. Small things, but they stay with you longer than they should. And the strange thing is, you're not performing for anyone in particular. Nobody asks you to be impressive. Nobody is grading you. But the performance runs anyway. Because somewhere along the way, you learn that conversations were something you could get wrong, and that changed everything. There's a specific kind of tired that comes after a day full of conversations where nothing was actually said. Not a bad day, not a hard day, just a day of surface, and somehow that's its own kind of heavy. Small talk isn't bad, that's not the point. It keeps things moving, it fills the gaps. It's how most relationships start, before they become something more. But there's a cost to it that nobody really names. Every time you say something that isn't quite what you actually think, there's a small gap between what came out and what was actually there. And that gap is tiny, barely noticeable, but it accumulates all day long. How was your weekend? Good, yeah, quiet. Yours? Yeah, same. And you move on. But somewhere underneath that exchange, there was an actual weekend with actual things in it that nobody asked about and that you didn't offer either. I've had whole weeks where I talked to a lot of people and still felt like nobody really knew what was actually going on with me. Not because I was hiding anything dramatic, just because the conversations never went anywhere near the real stuff, and I didn't push them there either. And that's the weight of it. Not that small talk is fake, not that people are cold, just that a day full of words can still leave you feeling like you haven't really spoken to anyone. And that feeling is harder to shake than it looks. Here's something worth separating out, because it's easy to look at all of this and think, maybe I just need fewer people. Maybe I'm just not a social person anymore. But that's probably not it. The problem isn't the people. It's the space that stays between you. You can have a perfectly pleasant conversation with someone you genuinely like. Laugh at the right moments. Ask the right questions. Live on good terms. And still drive home feeling like something was missing. Not from them, just from the exchange. Because there's a difference between being with someone and actually reaching them. And most conversations, even good ones, stay just slightly short of that second thing. Close enough to feel almost like connection, but far enough to leave a gap. And the distance isn't anyone's fault. It's just what happens when both people are managing the conversation instead of just having it. When both of you are slightly careful, slightly edited, slightly on. The gap between you isn't coldness. It's just two people being careful at the same time. I've noticed that conversations I leave feeling good about are almost never the ones where everything went smoothly. They are the ones where something slightly real happened, where someone said something unfiltered, or I did, where the careful version of the conversation got interrupted for a second, and something actual came through. So maybe the exhaustion isn't about talking too much. Maybe it's about the effort of staying just close enough to connect without ever quite getting there. That's a specific kind of work, and it doesn't show up on any list of things you did today, but your brain keeps the tab open. So what do you actually want when you leave a conversation feeling empty? More conversations? Fewer? Probably neither. What you want is simpler than that, and harder to find. What you're missing isn't more socializing, it's the feeling that used to come with it. That thing where you walked away from a conversation and felt more like yourself than before. Not performed out, not carefully managed, just refilled somehow. That feeling is rarer now, but it still exists. You've probably had it recently. Maybe not at a work event, maybe not at a party, but something simpler than that. A long phone call that went longer than expected. A conversation that started about nothing and ended somewhere real. A moment where the careful version of you took a step back and you were just there. Those conversations don't require a plan. They don't require the right setting or the right amount of time. They just require one person to say something slightly more real than usual, and the other person to meet them there. That's it. That's the whole thing. I don't think I need to talk less. I think I need to stop managing it so much. There are people in my life where the conversation just moves differently, where I'm not checking anything in the background, where I forget to be careful. And those are the ones I leave feeling like myself. I just don't have enough of them. Small talk probably isn't going anywhere, and neither is the mild exhaustion that comes with it. But maybe every once in a while, something slips through. A moment where the careful version steps aside, where the gap closes just enough, and the conversation becomes something you actually remember, Not because it was important, just because it felt real. And maybe that's all you were ever looking for.